this was the budget. This is what was on the website as the budget. Now, knowing what I know about Atlanta Public Schools budget, and knowing what I know about Fulton County's budget, and we were in the midst of, this was not sufficient. So we had to move to probably too much. But this is extremely comprehensive. But it's not conditions that create what will be your revenue. That's where you're living. But when you're thinking about your expenditures, you have to think about the conditions for which you operate, which is your Metro Atlanta. So it's just like when we look at policies. Sometimes we pull policies that are specifically Atlanta Metro, and we will pull DeKalb, Fulton.
What is the rank benchmark that we should compare ourselves for different line items? Is what we need to provide that visibility. Because we are a smaller system, we don't have the scale of others for the efficiency and getting negotiating certain contracts. We don't have the same footprint. We have different scale of schools. That's what I'm encouraging board and CSD to look at how you can provide more of that information up front to us so that we can understand better.
I think that's actually a really good idea. And I think the budget book is the right place to have it. I think it's a living document, obviously, and so that's going to be evolving. It also, I think what you're hearing us say here is that it's more complex than a single benchmark, right? There are going to be differences but I think that the point of having a living document is to evolve it towards perfection, and so that's great feedback. We'll see about trying to start to incorporate some of that.
I just wanted to clarify, I think the question, the pot, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. It would be much different.
That is the draft number 2, so that
Okay.
is the expenditures that you've been discussing for 4 months.
Right, so we are budgeting this amount, which I believe is like 66 million, for instruction. And that is 55.7% of FY27 budget draft, correct? Those facts are correct? Yes, okay. So I think where I'm now confused is the comparison to APS, because I understand APS may get different revenue. APS will get increased Title I funds, but teachers are teachers. And so in our instructional budget, I realize that, we are paying for the teachers. We're paying for certified subs, we're paying for art, music, PE, foreign language teachers. But is the explanation that APS is paying for more Title I teachers that would be paid through additional Title I revenue? Because that's where I'm lost.
Yes, that is one of many.
One committee.
Okay,
So I'll give you another example. APS earns a different rate on their sick leave that they fund locally for their teachers when they're out. That is not what is funded by the state. So once you go to retire, they remove that sick leave from your actual state calculation. They put that in there. So that's an example of more money going into the instruction percentage than what other districts do or us. So that's an example. That's where you cannot just look at pie charts and say this is what one district has in a percentage and therefore you must have that percentage, because the conditions, and why do I know that? Because I worked in APS and I know how much they actually put in. But if you're looking from externally, superintendents or CFOs or chief HRs do not sit down and compare, oh, what do you put in and what do you put in? It's very complex, but that is one of the reasons why. So there are multiple reasons why, actually, that percentage is so much more. And, Mr. Adams.
I'm gonna give an example from the school level. I was a Title I principal in Fulton County. My last year, I had 8 teachers funded strictly from Title I. And so I get my regular budget from the county, which includes state money. But on top of that, when you take 8 teachers, ballpark figure about $95,000 a teacher with benefits and packages, all that goes part of my budget as well. Plus, both of my instructional coaches were funded through Title I funds. And so the county wasn't paying that, all that money was coming from the federal government.
And they will split, where one will take the salary, and put all the salaries in, put all the salaries in general, but put the benefits over here. I mean, the way districts do that, guess what? We don't have that option. It's all right there. It's all right there.
Okay, at least one more budget question.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I think I saw between the first budget draft and the second budget draft, a difference in consultant costs. Can you speak to that line item and what has been removed in the second draft, if that is indeed what I understood? Thank you.
Need a minute or?
Where's the consultant?
I think she's, if you go back to the differences between fiscal year 26 and 27. Like,
Is it difference in drafts or what?
the,
Oh, the other one?
she's referring to this. Removal
My eyesight's not great, so I might not know which two they were, which would be.
So other support services, reduction in operational expenses consultant, that's what I thought you were talking about. You
I
said
think maybe that's what I,
increase.
think that's maybe what I, is there an increase in consultant costs? Or?
Overall, I remember there being, and I read that there's a decrease in overall consultant expenses. I have a paragraph on it.
This budget is by function, not object, and consulting is an object code, so I would have to go back and get into the object code comparison.
My quick answer is that I remember this being a negative, because I looked at everything that was a negative or a positive double digit. Consulting services was a decrease of more than double digits.
The other support services category is a very small category to begin with. And so the reduction of a single item out of there, for example, a single consultant out of there, has a high, like 40-odd% reduction in the overall line item, but we're still talking $40,000 or something. I don't quote you exactly on the numbers, but we're talking small dollars in a relatively small line item. When I looked at other services, I think it was like $150,000 before, and it's $50,000 now or something. So it's
It is over 40,000, 46,000. We go to the next one? Yeah, other support services is at 48,844. I'm seeing, I'm getting closer.
The last board meeting, we did say quit putting percentages without whole numbers, because it does cost this, where we'll do something like a 400% increase, and you're gonna go to the next file and be like, oh, that's an extra $48,000, which is a significant amount of money, but it's not as scary. My understanding is there were several consultant services that were cut from the budget.
Yes, it goes from
Can you speak to those?
146.
I think what I'm asking is, can you
Yeah.
speak to that at all?
Which ones they were?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to actually go, like, it's
Yes.
not on this presentation. Yeah, I would have to get you that information. If you send me an email, I can get you that information.
If you send an email to Dr. Brim, she will answer that question, and then I'll know as well, so I will appreciate the email. Okay, I will turn it over to Board Member Lutz, Board Member Green. All right, everybody, we're going to move to discussing the new Early Childhood Learning Center. So my portion of this presentation is really going to be a recap over what we discussed in the most recent board meeting. And then I believe Mr. Adams is going to come up and present
some options that are reflective of what the board had requested coming out of the last meeting. So tonight's update focuses on 3 critical pillars: the location, transparency, and design. We've heard from the community that the importance of honoring our history, and we'll do that. Placemaking is one way to celebrate Beacon Hills site's identity alongside the new ECLC. Examples of placemaking include green spaces, walls, walking paths, etc. We've explored working with student architecture groups to be a part of this design process. So this project began with a path process, which is a framework created by the architects to ensure that the building's design directly reflected Decatur's community values. We actively sought input from a broad range of local specialists, including experts in early learning, pediatrics, green space, and safety, to ensure that we had a well-rounded and representative vision based on these design principles. The planning team integrated the voices from across the district, and that included staff from College Heights, Fraser Center, and DHS, the schools that are going to be most impacted by the new building. So the data gathered from the PATH survey placed families and children at the heart of the project, ensuring that the community's highest priorities drive the design. The vision statement was created. The project is committed to creating an inclusive, accessible, safe, and sustainable campus that fosters a sense of belonging for all children, educators, and caregivers. That design is anchored by 7 key pillars. The first is inclusive and accessible design, safety and security, sustainable net zero goals, though I believe we are seeking LEED Silver certification, natural light and comfort, architectural harmony with the neighborhood, flexible community spaces, and child-oriented standards. Beyond its immediate function, the campus is designed to be a vibrant, adaptable space for both current and future generations. These principles were further validated during a joint meeting between City Schools and Decatur Board and the City Commission in October of 2024, ensuring alignment across the city. The project is driven by the scientific reality that the first 3 years of life are a high-stakes period for brain development. The center is designed to capitalize on that window and build strong cognitive and emotional foundations for Decatur's children. We've maintained an active two-way communication through the board community meetings, superintendent listening sessions, and direct outreach like the 2025 Back to School Bash. Throughout every engagement, there has been zero opposition. And I think this is important to note. There really has been zero opposition to the concept of early childhood education. The community remains united in the belief that high-quality early education is, in fact, a priority. So community feedback has been clear. There's universal support across Decatur for prioritizing this to address community concerns regarding congestion on Electric Avenue and, frankly, to provide better access to the facility for safety vehicles and things of that nature. We are giving a portion of the property over to expand and widen Electric Avenue. So Electric Avenue is the portion of the building that is between the Wilson Center and this lot. That's going to prioritize better access and traffic management for the area. Following the project's core security principles, the playground is situated within the building's interior, providing a protective and secure environment for the students. The design includes open green space that will be available for public use after school hours, fulfilling the commitment to creating a flexible and accessible community asset. While not every suggestion can be implemented, we listen to all feedback and integrate it along safety, operational requirements, and fiscal responsibility. The office and support spaces included in the design are consistent with every other school in the district. They are essential instructional support. These are the offices that just came up in the blue. This is like nurse office, director's offices, for example. The building includes these 9 spaces considered necessary for a functioning school, such as a clinic, security office, etc., and specialized areas for itinerant staff like speech pathologists and babies can't wait specialists. A small portion of the footprint that you just saw highlighted in green highlighter will house existing school psychologists currently working out of district-owned houses. These are the houses that the gentleman came up and spoke to about a minute ago. This is a relocation of current employees, not the creation of new positions, and it allows the district to sell those residential properties near Westchester. While it provides necessary workspace, the primary purpose and the majority of the footprint remain dedicated to being an early childhood learning center. The new facility replaces the outdated and cramped conditions at the Fraser Center, providing a modern environment that finally reflects the high quality care and education that Decatur expects for its youngest learners and staff. And now, Mr. Adams, I'll turn it over to you to present some offerings.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Vice Chair Hutz. Again, this is our current design. We have a guaranteed maximum price of $22 million. Once we are funded, we can begin construction. What you're looking at here is our first design, first option design, which represents a targeted adjustment to the current plan. The redesign removes approximately 1,600 square feet, primarily office space for the school psychologists. You will see on the diagram in the top right corner where that reduction occurs. It is a surgical cut to one side of the building, not a full redesign. As a result, the overall footprint is slightly reduced, and you will also see a small increase in green space and a reduction of 7 parking spaces. This option allows us to preserve the core of the instructional program while making visible adjustments to the building footprint. Option 2, redesign number 2, is more aggressive. In this scenario, we're reducing the footprint by over 10,000 square feet. For our architect and consultant, which requires a complete redesign of the building. You will see a much larger portion of the building footprint removed, along with the reduction of 13 parking spaces and an increase of contiguous green space. However, this level of square foot reduction does not come without trade-offs. To achieve this, we will be removing key components of the instructional program, including pre-K spaces, indoor play space, conference and support areas that are part of a fully functioning early childhood learning center, and we will be ignoring a key request from the community to provide a community amenity space. So while this footprint is reduced and green space is increased, the impact on children's programming is significant, and we ignore the request for community amenity space. This slide summarizes the impact of all 3 designs: the current design, the office reduction, and the aggressive reduction. From a cost standpoint, the current design is a guaranteed maximum price of approximately $22 million. The office reduction estimate cost is slightly higher due to fees and other soft costs. The aggressive design lowers overall construction costs, but introduces additional costs and risk. It is important to note that both options introduce escalation risk, including rebidding, construction inflation, which is over 12% nationally in the first quarter of 2026, and market volatility. Both options increase contiguous green space. However, those gains come with major trade-offs to core programming components, community amenity of space, indoor play, and critical support areas. So while each option provides a different balance of footprint, cost, and green space, it also introduces varying levels of impact on programming, the timeline, and the overall project risk. At this time, I'll return it back over to Board Member Ariel to discuss the upcoming special call meeting.
Good evening. Tonight's meeting is an important opportunity for community input and insight on ECLC, and I appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. I also want to be transparent about where we are as a board. While we may not be able to answer every question tonight, at our last board meeting, I made a motion to further explore the proposed archaeological study, which required administration to gather additional information from the archaeologists, as well as engaging with the Beacon Hill elders and the city commission to gather more facts. Once this information is gathered, the Board of Education will hold a special call meeting on this Monday, April 27th, from 12 noon to 2 p.m., where we will publicly discuss the archaeological study and the potential implications of SB 625. As many of you know, SB 625 was recently passed state bill that requires a referendum for PFA bonds exceeding $20 million. We're still waiting to see if that will be signed by the governor or not. And it raises important considerations for this project, which was approved in October to build the ECLC and do important renovations here at Decatur High School. That included, I think, the addition of a black box theater and an auxiliary gym. So I believe that any significant shift from what was originally approved by this board, whether related to scope, funding, or direction, should be discussed transparently and acted on through a public vote. So we are going to now open things up for public discussion.
It was discussed at the last board meeting, the observation rooms, and there was a fear that there weren't enough students for them. Do we have more information on how many kids are currently in early childhood education? How many kids signed up for early childhood education and were not accepted into the program? And have we asked 8th and 9th grade students if they would have signed up if there was a spot for them? Because my kid wanted to sign up for it in 8th grade and was told, it's not worth your time, you can't get into the early childhood education program unless you are a sophomore. And if you don't get in when you're a sophomore, you're kind of out of luck in the IB career path, and you have to have 2 years of classroom instruction and then an internship. Do we have those numbers? Because as we talk about gutting the building, losing a lot of that early childhood education space is, our high schoolers are going to miss out as much as our teachers' children are hopefully none pregnant teenagers or young mothers. It's certainly not in my house. And, children of our community. You have?
Yeah, I think she has something. Hi, good evening, everyone. This came up at the last board meeting, and so for next school year, we have 186 high school students that are registered in the ECE classes. We only have one ECE teacher right now, but certainly if our, if we were able to expand, then we could have more than just one high school teacher.
So if we build the building as originally planned, there would be space for more kids that didn't get in to potentially get in the future.
We could, yes, we would be able to, yes,
Space, yes, maybe not funding for another teacher, maybe not.
that's
No
right,
promises,
that's right.
and my kids will be graduated by then. You're off the hook with me. I want to say 2 more things. I want to say that I did not understand the CTAE program until my kid got to the high school, and I thought that it was for kids for whom college was not their first choice. And that is 100% not what it is for. It is such an amazing resource at the high school, especially for kids who are so sick of looking at graphic design or architecture or other things that I don't even know go around. So, the one thing that I want to say is that I only want us to do this if we do it right. These children that are going to use this building deserve for us to do it right. And we seem to be acting like these children do not deserve what we would expect for our children. As a community, last year at this time, there were turning over chairs about the word equity in our charter. And now come today, I believe in early childhood education, but it's not gonna benefit me, so I don't wanna pay for it. It seems to be a theme throughout that community. And I am embarrassed by that. So I wanna see us do this, but only if we're gonna do it right.
I had a question because, okay, because this has now come up multiple times in the last board meeting and the day of the guaranteed maximum price. And I'm curious, like, is the board aware that there are numerous exclusions in that guaranteed maximum price contract?
I mean, I think, I understood that pretty much the way a lot of these contracts go wrong.
Right. And aware that it has exclusions for tariffs, for actions from government, so theoretically war would be an action of government that could pass through increased prices. There's exclusions for storage of materials. There isn't explicit protections against inflation, like in the terms. So I think it's a little misleading to continue to, and the guaranteed maximum price is just $22 million without being clear that there is a plausible number of scenarios where that cost is more than $22 million. And I don't think we've actually seen that type of scenario analysis. I also wanted to emphasize, or ask a question on another scenario analysis. Have we looked at HB 116 and the impact of the likely downgrading of Georgia debt and what that would cause? The cost of our interest, either public loans or bank loans. There's an article from UBS saying that they expect that the ratings agencies will downgrade Georgia debt, and that will impact the financials for us, the current projected financials. So do we have those sensitivity analysis looking at if there are downgrades, what would that mean to the rates that we can actually afford to pay?
I'm no expert on that, I'm no, anyone else?
I mean,
Yeah, we are aware that there are exclusions in the contract, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the contracts, when you work with capital groups, when they have that, they'll have exclusions. And 22, they would have to come forth and they would create legal stuff to do it. And I think it's pretty common to refer to that as a maximum and that sort of stuff. As far as the debt, I mean,
But do we know how much those exclusions might be? Because things like subsurface conditions, what would be the cost of having to get that? What would be the cost of a potential tariff impact?
this is a great thing where I think we've had previous where this is what Mr. Adams' job is and why we hire people.
So, funny you would ask, I brought our construction company Paris here, who guaranteed that 21.5 guaranteed maximum price. And we still have over $3 million of contingency built inside of that, as well. We meet once a week, to discuss the project, where we are with things. And Paris, they can come up, but they have not mentioned anything to alert us that, hey, we're going down a rabbit hole that we're not gonna be able to hold to that guaranteed maximum price that you give us. Is that accurate, or you wanna add to it?
No, you hit it nail on the head. We have contingencies built in to the amount to cover any of those unforeseens that we can't plan for right now.
Paris has been building K-12 schools for a long time, so they're pretty good.
And I would just want to add on, this is an urban site bill. And so the rough order magnitude of budget and specifically cost per square foot was one of the questions that we have received multiple times. But one of the reasons why your cost per square foot or your round budget is what it is So when working at former district, and it was more of a suburban area, not Main Street in College Park, it was done a little different. But it was the same district, but more of an urban site versus a suburban site.
Your second question was a fascinating one about the debt, the downgrading in Georgia. There's an argument that says that in the right time, there's an argument that we should have acted on the bond already. There's another argument that as interest rates go down, we may benefit from delaying, from the increased costs. I know DeKalb County just got a downgrade from the S&P. I also know that UBS report is more about state level debt as opposed to city and municipality debt. A lot of times when states get downgraded, there is a run towards municipalities, which can save us money. It's a very complicated answer. I'm aware of it. As a board, we're not discussing or anything like that. We're not discussing anything else. Well,
But I guess that's actually my point, it's complicated,
Yeah.
and it warrants running scenarios, and I'm curious if we have run those scenarios.
I don't disagree, and I think moving around the chairs and advocating things are happening, but the truth is that parishes built buildings reliably using the comptrollers in this city and this state repeatedly, that our own director of operations has given them a thumbs up, and as a board, they've passed my muster on what I think should pass, et cetera. And then we got some advice from a bond company, and they talk to us all the time about what can happen to do it. But I don't think you should not expect your board members to be breaking down bond prices and making, like nuanced decisions about that.
I agree.
Yeah.
They should be asking the school district if they've done that analysis, so that you have comfort that there's fiscal responsibility, and that's why I'm curious, it's like, how have we done that scenario now?
Oh, yeah.
Given that it is very likely at this point that AB 116 is gonna become law, and there are paths like where that could have either very significant detrimental impact to the cost of debt or potentially beneficial. It's worth us like looking at what that looks like before we're making decisions.
So Davenport is the financial advisor for the city and the municipality. They have given a presentation on that. They also have brought up, in my time on the board, 3 times when the opportunity to refinance debt has created an opportunity. They reached out to us and recommended we take action. Dr. Broom brought it to the board, I believe, 3 years ago, these scenarios. So they do their job and bring it to the board, I think, fairly well. I've complimented Dr. Broom multiple times for the way she used Davenport to come to us in 2021. In 2021 and said, like, we knocked about $300,000 a year off of the budget because the advisor was doing their job.
So 2021, in 2026, it sounds like we haven't done the scenarios right now for HB.
They've been here twice to discuss this project in front of the board.
Right, but those options that they showed were not considering HB 116, those were considering simply different options of public debt financing, bank financing, referendum financing, so I'm just trying to understand, right?
I think they'll also have a very little time to put those estimates together as well, so that's another consideration that I'm sure will be for us.
And can I just clarify, because I think you started with the GMP, and are you aware of, these possible cost increases? And so it sounds like we're being told there's a contingency plan, it sounds like we're being told, Parish has experience doing this. I think the one thing I'm a little uncomfortable with is just, I think the current environment's different. I mean, I don't know how much y'all are paying for gas, and I keep reading I might not even be able to take my daughter to the next soccer tournament in a month if there isn't fuel. So I guess I would like to be comforted that Parish has built in the option C contingency, because it sounds like, since the U.S. is engaged in international affairs, that might be a more extreme thing than, your garden variety cost increase because of X. But I wanted to know, are you also asking about the contingency plan for the operational cost, or you're simply talking about the GMP, or, I'm sorry, the scenarios that we've run through for costs? Are you asking solely about how we would pay for this, or are you also asking what the scenarios are for the operational cost of the ECLC? I think the current model is 50-50, so what happens if you don't have 50 that are getting full funded? What happens if it turns out that we only have 25 staff that need to use it and therefore, do you want scenarios just for construction or you want scenarios for operations?
Well, I was asking about two different scenarios.
Okay.
Like construction and financing. There's expenses like on construction, like which they alluded to having some motion. There's scenarios around financing, that's based on the rates that you're able to get from the market, like when you go get financing. There's a risk there in the market right now, and then from the corporate side, we're looking at that very closely, and then you go over all uncertainty in the markets right now, except for our HB 1116. There is also a curve sensitivity analysis around the operating construct of how you fund this, can you get grants, like, the last community meeting, there was the question around grants and philanthropic funding. We still haven't heard on who have we actually talked to, who we're committing to, like, we're, your answer would have broken ground a few months ago, and you should have had some of those conversations already, so.
Thank you.
Here's one.
So, good evening, and I'm allowed, so you guys can, they asked the question was, have we taken those, I can speak towards construction. Yes, like again, we meet once a week. We meet externally with parish team and our architect and our consultant. And then we meet internally on Fridays as a CSD team. And that's what we kind of run through all our scenarios and everything that's going on. We're very cognizant of what's happening in Iran and the impact of what it does in America. Because we've seen what happens when the Middle East impacts us in America before. We've seen this before. We don't know how this is gonna end, how long it's gonna be, but we never know how long it's gonna be in the Middle East. But part of the weekly conversation with our construction team and our design team is to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing, that we don't want any surprises. I'm gonna just let Paris speak exactly so you all can hear from the horse's mouth, not this mouth.
So as parish, we are still confident in the $22 million GMP that we have. I would say that our cushion, the longer we wait and we can't start moving dirt and doing all these parts and pieces, becomes at risk. But the cushion's there. It was well thought out by the design team, your program manager, as well as parish and our historical knowledge. So again, we're still very confident in it. And it's not anything I can use just willy-nilly. I have to report to Jarvis and the rest of the team on what all that looks like, because you've obviously seen our contract. All these things are open book. There's nothing hidden. We use transparency quite a bit. That happens a lot through the whole process.
Wade Roberts, also live on Westchester Drive. I just have a question about the cost savings that you were on the slide you showed for the alternative designs. So the building, the original design is about 35,000 square feet. That's a $22 million building. So that's implying, I realize there's groundwork going on. That implies roughly $625 square foot building cost. Let's go to the aggressive cut. You're cutting a third of the building, roughly 30%, 10,000 square feet, and you're saving only 10% of the cost. You're saving $2.24 million by cutting 10,000 square feet. So that implies that section you're cutting is $224 a square foot. So I would just like some transparency on where those numbers are coming from. I realize some of that's groundwork that still has to be done. But if it's a $224 square foot building, this should be a $7.8 million building at 35,000 square feet. So where are these numbers coming from? And if it's going to be a 25,000 square foot building that still costs $20 million, that's an $800 a square foot building. Right? So what am I missing here? That we're cutting a third of the building, we're hardly saving anything. I mean, if I was you guys and I was looking to put forward evidence to support a position that said, hey, we need to stick with the original plan, I would obviously do what you guys have done here and say, look, we're not going to save any money. We need a smaller building, not spending money, but why are we not saving more money by cutting a third of the building.
Go ahead, first, sir.
Well, no, you're gonna have to, so I'll be entirely honest, that question lines up very clearly with one of mine, right? I think it's probably wrong to look at it as saying it's it's 220 a square foot for the part that we're cutting, and much more, why is it $800 a square foot once you cut that? And so I do wanna hear the answer to that question.
I think one of the folks earlier did mention that this has all happened in less than a week. So this is off our historical data, just simply cutting off a certain amount of square footage. You make a great point. Site work doesn't change. Other things have to be added in when we start taking these things away. For example, the playground has to remain protected from the rest of the outdoors. It can't be just open. So you're deleting a part of the building, we're adding back what we believe the city of Decatur is gonna require, which is a high-end brick type wall or facade or something like that. So there's cuts and then there's add backs. On top of that,
We're talking about a fence, correct?
no, we're not talking about a fence.
Or a wall?
Wow, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it made out of gold? I mean, what kind of wall are we talking about?
Sir, I'm giving you one example for how this goes. So we went through, and there are things that delete, and there are other things that don't change at all, and they increase. We also had to include escalation, because if either of these options happen, we have to rebid the entire project at today's prices. We bid this project originally and went into GMP back in December of last year. We have locked in all of our trade partners off those numbers from last year. So if we have to rebid this, you're gonna have that 12% escalation that was in the books for quarter one of this year, plus 3 quarters, or 2 to 3 quarters, because the design team has to redesign. We don't go back to bid until July, August, somewhere in that area. So we're including the escalation to try to give you a real snapshot of what the impact is.
I want to say I think the question's good. The first thing was what Han said, just like, we're seeing this for the first time as well, as a board. It's not like we've discussed this or whatever. And I wrote down my notes as part of the slide. Okay, so we're saving about 10%. What is that $1.5 million in additional cost? I got an immediate response of like, a lot of the expenses in the school building are in the technology and the equipment, and like, that has to be there regardless. That's not good enough. But I want to say very clear, I also want answers to what the $1.5 million look like.
Yeah, that would just be helpful for all of us to understand. We see the number, we just like to know the thinking that went into that. Actually, somebody did a calculation.
Right.
Be nice to see.
Is it safe to say, this is the question to administration and parish, is it safe to say that with more time, there will be more refinement on these numbers? These are estimates that you've come up with in a relatively short period of time, but with a little bit more time and some more pencil sharpening, we might see other estimates. I understand inflation costs, I understand that there's going to be an increase in some of these costs. Going from 625 a square foot to 800-ish a square foot is a lot more than the 12% that we're talking about, right? So I guess I'm just asking, is that something that you anticipate, or do you think you've done the work and these actually are the numbers that you would anticipate?
I mean, there's always an option of it improving with more time, more effort. This is not enough to send to the market to say, hey, what would this cost?
So yeah, that's kind of
because the numbers would be wild. And unfortunately, opening the curtains a little bit here, I can't even send this to the people that are under contract, because the nature of what we do, folks don't get full credit back. So that's where I say we have to go into a whole new bidding process in order to be good stewards of the money that goes into the facility.
And I just want the follow-up question is, with that aggressive cut, have we just ruined a lot of the spirit of the building? Like, we take away some of what we need the building, the functionality of the building space itself. You cut out some of the significant portion of the play space. You removed a lot of the community amenity space, some parts that, although we cannot get to, a 50% green space option
$225 a square foot for a third of the building, what are we putting in the rest of the building? I mean, they're 4 times as expensive on a square foot basis.
It's probably more accurate to say that this is a conservative estimate based upon presumptions about inflationary growth. And there is an opportunity, as I think James was saying, for us to look a little bit harder and dig a little bit deeper. The number's gonna be higher, but we'll work on that.
Yeah, I think to add, if we went to bid on the current design right now, we wouldn't be under 22 million. If we had to rebid the job, and if we had to rebid the same design 3 months from now, the price is gonna continue to escalate. And so the price per square foot is gonna go up, as the gentleman there sitting behind you said. As things in the Middle East change, we can expect the price per square foot to increase each time we go out to bid.
I'm guessing too that these prices, when you're comparing square foot, you know, of the smaller buildings are higher because we're doing this after the fact, right? And so if maybe we had done this earlier, it would have been looking at the price per square foot would have been nice. But that's why
Yes.
we are where we are.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have those soft costs, which are redesign, re-permitting,
Right.
extra, everything that I have to do, everything that y'all's team has to do, all that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Two hopefully very quick things. One is what I'm hearing, a couple of things I'm hearing is that timing and groundbreaking and all of that is likely pushed out. Hanti mentioned earlier that no one, I certainly haven't heard anyone against the idea of early childhood and supporting it. And one of the things was wondering is there a way that many of us could come together and admit to saying, let's get those kids in seats this fall, right? Where we could say, we can raise the funds, and if you keep this box open at College Heights, she's on the list, but we can push her down. To keep those spots open and at Fraser, I think that would maybe give a little breathing room, because it would say, we are committed to early childhood. The whole community is gonna come together, and we're gonna make sure every single child who wants it gets that service. And then maybe because what I'm hearing is a lot of angst about the timing. And so maybe if we could just commit to saying, there's not a single kid in the city at DHA, who lives in DHA, who's not gonna have early childhood who wants it in August. Like, we could make that, I think we could make that commitment. And the second is wondering about SLT functions. Like, if this is already starting as a school, maybe it's worth, if, you know, there are other staff I know already in mind, that we think about having an SLT already come together to think of, and with DHA parents and families to, because I don't know the answer to this. Maybe it actually is a $50 million building, but there are 186 kids in ECE, and I have no idea. I actually don't know what this building needs. And I think maybe a part of that timing is get that SLT together and say, maybe it is a $50 million building, and we'll all support it going to referendum, because that's what we actually need. I'm just not totally sure.
So, great questions. So the original PAC session actually included SLT members from College Heights. So that's one of the things that we did do to help inform what would be included in ESWA. That's how we came up with, you know, where we are today. So they have been a part. Now, granted, we haven't chartered a new SLT. We haven't hired the principal for the school. We haven't done any of that as of yet, just because it's truly conceptual at the moment. Now, as far as current programming, meaning are the rosters complete here at the Fraser Center? That, I'm going to be honest, right now, really is the people that serve our children every single day. That's the primary makeup of the Fraser Center. So we do have some children who are from the housing authority right now there, but that means we're going to have to pull back from the staff who have children in the early learning center. Now, when I not the, I would say the Fraser Center. Not really not really College Heights as much, but here at the Fraser Center. So those are some things that, if that's what the community wants to do, know that that will have implications for the teachers who actually teach our children in K-12 in our system.
One of the questions that I have in the spirit of expanding early childhood education, we have, I know we haven't had a full conversation as a board about this, but I would like us to. We've talked a little bit around the edges about moving pre-K, some of the classrooms in pre-K out of College Heights into some of the schools on the north side. Claremont probably most likely. If that happens, does that increase space for 0 to 3 at College Heights? Does that give us any options for, no, okay, so you wanna explain that to the community, because I think there's some questions around it.
They're in trailers, can't put the free in trailers.
Yeah, so that,
But so then, that means that we have pre-K in trailers. And can we move pre-K into the schools on the north side? I realize it's a lot for this fall, but what would it look like? What would it look like if we were to commit to doing that and have that conversation as a body and to talk? I mean, I'm seeing a lot of nodding around the table. There's probably some will on this board to have that discussion.
Good evening. I have a question about the two, well, really the three design options. I guess a very basic question. Can you share more context behind why these two additional options are being presented? Like how are we as the public to digest this information? Is this options the board is voting on? Are these options the superintendent is actually considering? Why is this being presented?
I can provide that. So at the board meeting, there was a discussion about listening to the community, cutting costs, and so we asked, could we, before the community meeting, get a presentation of what would it look like if we step back to increase green space? There was a robust conversation about what if we got rid of the needed offices over to the side. There's no vote, like this is the conversation, we'll have another conversation on Monday, the special call board, we're still waiting on a funding conversation, which we'll also do on Monday, and then we'll go from there. That's a consent.
So this is part of Monday's board meeting, is a discussion about these redesign options. Maybe I misheard, I didn't think.
No, to be very clear, Monday is about the archaeological monitoring and SB 625, which is a funding conversation.
So I guess as a, just to be transparent, as a parent and community member hearing this, I'm wondering, why am I being told this information, right? Are these options that Dr. Whitaker or the board is actually considering, or is this sort of, somebody alluded to, is this being put up here to strike something down and say, well, it's not realistic, right? Like, and how I hear it, and how I think folks here hear it, depends on what is the point of sharing this, right? That's where I'm going.
If you love one of the options and you hate two of them, please tell us. I think what we're looking for is some perspective from the community. We heard from one member of the community that sounded like she was very much in support of the original option. We picked that, let's go with that. But we'd love to hear from the community around your perspective, right? Understanding the conversation about numbers that we just had, et cetera, but if you have a perspective or a particular strong feeling in one way, I think we're actually soliciting that perspective from y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's helpful. I appreciate that information. Let's address a couple things, and I think maybe you may not be able to talk about it, because it might be for Monday, but we've got a bill that might get passed that keeps the project at $20 million or under. We've got designs that we're considering that might be different. I would assume part of that reason is to get it under the $20 million threshold and not slow things down, which then likely means that DHS and bond refinancing has to come out of the right? I actually think you have an extraordinary opportunity right now that I asked a couple of you personally, starting a year ago. There is a chance to take whatever pause you have in front of you and include the community in meaningful ways to the community, right? I know we've seen all the charts and the lists on how the past sessions, that was in 2024, it's a long time ago. Like, the world has changed since then. I think we can all agree the world has changed since then. I would strongly encourage you to collect the community input, to talk about what this new building looks like, to talk about how you can honor history in a real and meaningful way that exists on that site. It can be done together. To what Caroline said, we can find a way to get this next cohort in seats in early education. The community will do that. We have got your backs. We believe in early childhood education. Take this minute. Take this minute so it's not a rush. Well, it could be, and maybe, and we might save 1 point, we might save $2 million, but we're not really sure, and how does that work, and what's this, like, just, you have been given a gift. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like it's a pause and a resetting the clock and not serving kids. Take the gift. Be transparent. I'm so